The combat training facility's overhead lights cast sharp shadows across the reinforced mats, highlighting every scuff mark from 4 centuries of Velshara's instruction. The Vostari instructor stood near the weapon racks, her crystalline body a calm blue, 4 diamond-arranged eyes scanning her datapad with the enthusiasm of someone reading maintenance schedules, which she was. Gravity calibration is 0.03% off standard, she said, her resonant voice carrying across the empty facility. Her 2 crystalline arms held the datapad at a precise angle. This is unacceptable. Cadet Harper, the human, sat cross-legged on a practice mat 17 feet away, stylus moving across her own datapad. She didn't look up. Noted, instructor. Velshara's internal light matrices pulsed once. In 3 months, the human had been the most unremarkable student she'd ever taught. Attended every session, took extensive notes, performed adequately in all drills, never volunteered, never complained, never did anything interesting whatsoever. It was refreshing, honestly. Velshara had grown tired of overachievers. The facility door hissed open. Cadet Thayer entered, his chitinous green exoskeleton gleaming under the lights, compound eyes reflecting the room in thousands of tiny fragments. His antennae stood at perfect attention, mandibles clicking in the Crixian equivalent of a respectful greeting. Instructor Velshara, he said, his 2 arms clasped behind his back in textbook military posture. I've completed the thermal resistance certification you recommended. Of course you have. Velshara's color remained blue. Thayer was top of the class, which meant he did exactly what he was told, exactly when he was told, with exactly the correct technique. Your dedication to protocol is noted. What she didn't say, Thayer had also been asking increasingly pointed questions about appropriate challenge levels and species-specific combat assessment parameters. His antennae twitched in that specific pattern that meant he was thinking about something he thought was clever. Velshara had been teaching for 400 years. She knew that pattern. Harper's stylus kept moving. She still hadn't looked up. The human, Thayer said, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Cadet Harper, has she completed advanced certification? No. Intermediate? No. Has she completed basic certification? Velshara's facets refracted the light differently, the Vostari equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Cadet Harper has completed exactly what is required. Nothing more, nothing less. She is a model of adequacy. Thayer's antennae drooped slightly, then perked back up. I see, and humans are. Which threat classification? Unclassified. Earth joined the Galactic Council only 6 months ago. Velshara set her datapad on the equipment bench, her 2 arms moving with practiced efficiency. Their embassy submitted basic physiological data, but detailed combat assessments are pending. Why? Curiosity, instructor. That was a lie. Velshara's body shifted to a light purple. Her internal matrices pulsed faster. Cadet Thayer, if you're planning something. The gravity calibration alarm beeped. 0.03% off standard had apparently escalated to 0.05% off standard. Velshara turned toward the control panel embedded in the wall, crystalline fingers already reaching for the diagnostic interface. Excuse me one moment, she said, her stress chiming barely audible. This facility is supposed to be maintained to specifications. She was aware, distantly, that Thayer's antennae were vibrating in a specific pattern. The pattern Crixians used when communicating on private frequencies. She was also aware that Harper had stopped writing. But 0.05% off standard was unacceptable, and Velshara had her priorities straight. The control panel opened with a hiss. Velshara leaned in, both arms working the diagnostic tools, her 4 eyes scanning readouts that made no sense. The gravity generator was fine. The calibration was fine. The alarm was simply wrong, which was somehow worse than if something had actually broken. Behind her, the facility door hissed open 3 more times. Velshara didn't turn around. She was busy. Cadet Harper, Thayer's voice said, perfectly polite. We've been discussing species integration protocols. Harper's voice was flat, disinterested. Okay, there's concern you haven't properly integrated. I come to class. Yes, but combat assessment requires practical demonstration. Thayer's mandibles clicked in what was probably supposed to be friendly. We thought we'd help you prepare. Velshara pulled a tool from the panel, squinting at a sensor cluster. Had the maintenance crew even looked at this? That's nice of you, Harper said, sounding like she was discussing paint drying. It's only fair, another voice said. Another Crixian by the vocal resonance. You've been here 3 months. You should know what you're up against. Velshara's crystalline fingers paused. She should probably turn around. She didn't. The sensor cluster had a microscopic crack. Sure, Harper said. There was a sound, multiple sounds actually. 4 distinct impacts, each accompanied by chitinous crunching. Then something heavy hit the reinforced floor. Then something else hit the wall. Then something else hit the ceiling, which shouldn't have been physically possible unless... Velshara turned around. 4 Crixian cadets were scattered across the combat training facility in positions that violated several laws of physics and at least 2 laws of common sense. One was embedded shoulder-deep in the reinforced mat, legs sticking up at an angle that suggested he'd been pile-driven into it with significant force. His antennae twitched weakly. One was hanging from the overhead light fixture, somehow wedged between the reinforced housing and the ceiling panel. His mandibles clicked in confusion. One was sprawled against the far wall, slowly sliding down it, leaving a chitinous smear across the observation window. One was just. His exoskeleton wasn't broken exactly, but his legs were bent in directions that Crixian legs definitely didn't bend, and his arms were tucked behind his back in what looked like he'd tried to handcuff himself, and succeeded. Thayer stood near them, frozen mid-step, his antennae perfectly straight with shock. Harper sat cross-legged on her practice mat, stylus moving across her datapad. She looked up, made eye contact with Velshara for exactly 1 second, then went back to writing. "Gravity calibration is still off," she said. Velshara's body shifted from purple to a deep, concerned violet. Her stress chiming started, a soft crystalline ringing that filled the facility. "What? They slipped," Harper said, her tone suggesting this was obvious. The cadet embedded in the floor groaned. "All 4 of them," Velshara said slowly, her 4 eyes moving from one disaster to another, "slipped. Training facility floors are dangerous." Harper tapped her stylus against her datapad, "especially when gravity calibration is 0.05% off standard." "That wouldn't." Velshara stopped. Her internal matrices pulsed rapidly. "Cadet Harper, did you?" "I was taking notes." Harper held up her datapad. The screen showed detailed annotations about gravity variance effects on non-human locomotion, time stamped from 30 seconds ago. Which was impossible, because the incident had occurred 30 seconds ago and nobody could write that fast while. The cadet on the ceiling fell. He hit the mat with a wet crunch, mandibles clicking in pain. "I should call medical," Velshara said, her body shifting to a darker purple. "Probably," Harper agreed. Velshara's 2 arms reached for her communicator. Her 4 eyes never left the human. Harper's brown hair was still in its regulation bun. Her uniform was unwrinkled. She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't even looking at the 4 incapacitated Crixians. She was just taking notes. "Cadet Thayer," Velshara said, her resonant voice carefully controlled. "What happened?" Thayer's antennae were vibrating at frequencies Velshara had never seen before. His mandibles worked silently. His compound eyes reflected the overhead lights in thousands of tiny, horrified fragments. "She was just sitting there," he finally said. "Yes, we approached from 4 directions, standard flanking protocol, perfect execution. And she didn't move." Thayer's exoskeleton had started making tiny stress cracks. "She just..." Her hand came up. "Once. I couldn't even see it. Then Kresh was in the ceiling, and Ven was in the wall, and Tor was folded, and Jix was just gone into the floor." Velshara's stress chiming intensified. Her hand, one hand. Thayer held up one of his own 2 arms, staring at it like it had betrayed him. "She used one hand for all 4. That's not possible, I know." Thayer's antennae drooped completely. "But she's still just sitting there, taking notes, like nothing happened." Velshara looked at Harper. Harper looked at her datapad. The cadet in the wall slid down another 6 inches, with a squeak of chitin against reinforced polymer. "Cadet Harper," Velshara said, her body now a solid, concerning purple. "Stand up!" Harper stood, slowly, both her arms hanging loosely at her sides, her datapad dangling from one hand. She looked like every board student Velshara had ever taught, except for the part where 4 trained Crixian combat cadets were scattered around her like broken toys. "Did you strike these cadets?" "They slipped, instructor." 4 highly trained Crixians who passed advanced spatial coordination certification all slipped simultaneously in 4 different directions, and one of them slipped upward into the ceiling. Harper's expression didn't change. "The gravity calibration is not sufficient to explain this." Velshara's chiming had reached the pitch that usually preceded catastrophic crystal fractures. Her body was approaching red. "Cadet Harper, I am 400 years old. I have trained 17,000 students across 43 species. I have never seen someone slip into a ceiling. First time for everything, instructor. The folded cadet unfolded slightly, whimpering. Velshara's 4 eyes narrowed. Her 2 crystalline arms crossed her chest. Her internal light matrices were pulsing so fast they looked solid. Demonstrate your combat stance. My what? Your combat stance. The position you were in when these cadets allegedly slipped. Harper glanced at her datapad, then back at Velshara. I was sitting down. Show me. Harper sat down, cross-legged, datapad in lap, stylus in hand. She looked like a student taking notes, which is exactly what she'd looked like before, which meant, "That's not a combat stance," Velshara said. "I know." "Then how did you?" "I didn't do anything, instructor." Harper's tone remained completely flat. "I was sitting here, taking notes. They came over, then they slipped. It was very unfortunate." Thayer made a sound like a broken whistle. Velshara's body hit full red. Her stress chiming was loud enough to rattle the weapon racks. "Cadet Thayer, you said you saw her hand move." Thayer's antennae were trying to retreat into his exoskeleton. "I thought I did, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe the gravity. The gravity doesn't explain. Maybe I slipped too," Thayer said desperately. "Maybe we all slipped. Maybe this is a slipping facility. Maybe we should report it to maintenance." Velshara stared at him, then at Harper, then at the 4 Crixians scattered across her training facility in configurations that would require geometry textbooks to properly explain. Her datapad beeped. The gravity calibration had corrected itself. 0.00% off standard. Perfect. "Medical is on their way," Velshara said quietly, her stress chiming starting to fade. "We will discuss this incident in my office, all of you, once the injured have been treated." "Yes, instructor," Harper said, making a note on her datapad. Velshara turned back to the control panel, her crystalline fingers gripping the edge of the equipment bench hard enough to leave marks. Behind her, she could hear Harper's stylus moving across her datapad, a soft scratching sound that somehow felt threatening. 4 Crixians, advanced combat training, attack simultaneously from optimal positions, 1 human, sitting down, taking notes. The Crixians were in the ceiling. Velshara's body slowly faded from red back to purple, then to a deeply troubled blue. Her 4 eyes reflected the overhead lights, each one showing a slightly different angle of the carnage. She'd been teaching for 400 years. She'd never lost a student. She was starting to wonder if she'd been teaching the wrong species. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and broken confidence. Velshara stood near the entrance, her crystalline body a steady purple, watching a medic work on the 4th Crixian with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for archaeological reconstruction. "His legs aren't supposed to bend this way," the medic said, mandibles clicking with professional concern. "I'm aware," Velshara replied. "I mean, they really aren't supposed to bend this way. I'm looking at the anatomy charts, and according to Crixian physiology, this position would require his joints to dislocate, relocate, and then dislocate again in the opposite direction. I'm aware. While maintaining structural integrity, I am aware." Velshara's stress chiming started up again, a soft crystalline ringing. The medic wisely said nothing else and continued working. Harper sat on a medical bench near the wall, datapad in lap, stylus moving. She'd been sitting there for 20 minutes. She hadn't looked up once. Her brown hair was still in its regulation bun. Her uniform was still unwrinkled. She looked like she was reviewing grocery lists. Cadet Thayer stood next to Velshara, his antennae drooping so low they were nearly touching the floor. His chitinous green exoskeleton had developed several new stress fractures. He kept staring at Harper like she might suddenly transform into something that made sense. "Instructor," he said quietly, "I need to file an official report." "About what?" Velshara's 4 eyes didn't move from Harper. "About." Thayer's mandibles worked silently. "The incident. The slipping incident." "Yes, no. I mean, his antennae twitched. She moved. I know she moved. But I can't explain how she moved, and if I can't explain how she moved, then my report will sound like I'm having a neurological episode. Then perhaps you shouldn't file a report." "But instructor, she incapacitated 4 trained combat specialists without standing up, allegedly." Thayer made a sound like a kettle boiling over. "Instructor, with respect, I was there. I saw something. I don't know what I saw, but I saw it, and it violated every principle of combat dynamics I've ever learned." Velshara's body shifted to a darker purple. "Cadet Thayer, in 400 years of instruction, I've learned that sometimes incidents occur that defy immediate explanation. The appropriate response is observation and documentation, not panic. I'm not panicking. You're leaking ichor from your stress fractures." Thayer looked down at his exoskeleton. He was, in fact, leaking. "Oh." Harper's stylus kept moving. Velshara's internal matrices pulsed faster. She'd been trying to write her own incident report for the past 20 minutes. The current version read, 4 cadets were injured during a training exercise due to apparent gravity calibration malfunction. It was a lie. It was also the only explanation that wouldn't require her to use phrases like impossible velocity or violation of basic physics or the human did something. The problem was that Velshara had been teaching for 400 years, and she'd never filed a false report in her life. The larger problem was that she couldn't file a true report because she still didn't know what had actually happened. The largest problem was currently sitting on a medical bench, taking notes and radiating an aura of aggressive normality. Cadet Harper, Velshara said, her resonant voice carefully controlled. Please demonstrate your reflexes. Harper looked up. My what? Your reflexes? Standard response testing. Velshara moved to the medical equipment dispensary, her 2 crystalline arms retrieving a small sphere. I'm going to throw this, you're going to catch it. Simple assessment. Okay. Velshara threw the sphere. A gentle underhand toss, slow enough to track visually. Any species with basic hand-eye coordination could catch it. Harper's hand moved. The sphere stopped. Velshara's 4 eyes widened. Harper's hand was suddenly just there, holding the sphere, even though Velshara's crystalline vision could process movement at roughly 4 times standard human perception, and she hadn't seen the hand move. It had been at Harper's side. Then it had been holding the sphere. No transition, no blur, just instant repositioning. Good reflexes, Velshara said, her stress chiming starting up again. Thank you, instructor. Harper set the sphere down and went back to her datapad. Thayer's antennae had gone completely rigid. Let's try something faster. Velshara retrieved another sphere, this one designed for advanced species with enhanced perception. She threw it at 3 times the previous speed. Harper caught it without looking up from her datapad. Velshara's body shifted to red. You weren't even watching. I heard it, Harper said, setting the sphere down next to the first one. You heard it. It makes a whistling sound when it moves through air. Aerodynamics. Harper tapped her stylus against her datapad. Basic physics. Catching an object by sound is not basic physics. On Earth it is. Velshara's stress chiming reached a pitch that made the medical equipment rattle. Cadet Harper, I'm going to need you to submit to a full physiological assessment. Why? Because you just caught a sphere designed to test species with 4 times human perception speed without looking at it, and I need to understand how that's possible. Harper's expression didn't change. I have normal human reflexes, instructor. That's what I'm afraid of. The medic looked up from the folded Crixian. Instructor, if I may, I've reviewed the human physiological data on file. But according to the embassy documentation, humans evolved on a Class 7 Deathworld. Velshara's 4 eyes snapped to the medic. A what? Deathworld. High gravity. Aggressive fauna. Toxic atmosphere precursors. Environmental hazards across multiple categories. The medic pulled up a file on his datapad. Earth scores 7, 2 on the Hostile Environment Index. For reference, the Crixian homeworld scores 2, 1. The Vostari homeworld scores 1, 3. Velshara's body went from red to a color that didn't have a name in galactic standard, and nobody thought to mention this. The embassy data was flagged as preliminary. Complete combat assessment pending. Combat A assessment pending. Velshara's stress chiming was now loud enough to qualify as a weapon. I've been teaching a Class 7 Deathworld species for 3 months, and the combat assessment is pending? Harper raised her hand slightly. Instructor, I'm not really a combat species. I'm in logistics. You put a Crixian in the ceiling. He slipped into the ceiling. The gravity was off. Velshara turned to Thayer. Get Admiral Cross on the communicator. Now. Thayer's antennae perked up slightly. The station commander? Yes. I need to speak with whoever approved Earth's integration protocol, and I need to speak with them immediately, and I need to speak with them before I have a complete crystalline fracture. Thayer scrambled to the communications panel, his 2 arms working the controls with desperate efficiency. Velshara turned back to Harper. Cadet, I need you to explain something to me. Honestly, no more talk about slipping. Okay. How fast can you move? Harper thought about it. Normal speed? Compared to what? Other humans. And how fast is that? Harper shrugged. I don't know. We don't really measure it. We just move. Velshara's internal matrices were pulsing so fast they looked like a solid light source. Can you see me move? She raised one crystalline arm, moved it in a slow arc, then lowered it. Yes. Can you track the movement? Yes. Could you intercept my hand mid-movement if you wanted to? Probably. Velshara moved her arm again, faster this time, a speed that would be a blur to most species. Harper's hand shot out and grabbed Velshara's wrist mid-arc. They both froze. Harper's grip was gentle but absolutely immovable. Velshara tried to pull away. Her crystalline arm didn't budge. It was like trying to move a mountain that happened to be shaped like a small human hand. "Sorry," Harper said, releasing her. "You asked if I could intercept it." Velshara's stress chiming had transcended sound and entered some kind of crystalline screaming dimension. "How strong are you?" "Normal." "Normal for what?" "Humans." The communications panel beeped. Thayer's voice cracked slightly. "Instructor, I have Admiral Cross." Velshara moved to the panel, her two arms gripping the edge hard enough to leave fingerprints in the metal. A holographic image flickered to life, showing a Torvanix admiral with 6 eyes and a perpetually tired expression. "Instructor Velshara," the admiral said, his translator rendering his voice in formal galactic standard. "This is irregular. I'm in the middle of—" "Who approved Earth's integration protocol?" The admiral blinked, all 6 eyes in sequence. "The Council's Standard Review Board." "Why? Did anyone actually read the physiological data?" "I assume so. Why? Did anyone notice that humans are from a Class 7 Deathworld?" There was a long pause. "A what?" 7. Class 7 high-gravity aggressive fauna, environmental hazards. Another pause. "That can't be right." The human ambassador seemed very reasonable. Reasonable. "I'm sure he did, right up until someone startled him and he accidentally punched through a bulkhead." "Instructor, you're not making sense." "I have a human cadet who just caught a reflex sphere designed for species with quadruple perception speed without looking at it. I have 4 Crixians in medical because they made the catastrophic mistake of approaching her without permission. One of them is a ceiling. Do you understand? A ceiling." The admiral's 6 eyes were now very wide. "The human did this while sitting down, taking notes. She claims they slipped into a ceiling." "Yes!" The admiral looked at something off-screen. "I'm pulling the Earth integration file now." He was quiet for a moment, then another moment. Then he made a sound like someone had kicked him. "Oh no." "What?" "The data was simplified for accessibility. The original file has footnotes." The admiral's hologram had started to flicker slightly. "Many footnotes. Extensive footnotes. Footnotes with their own footnotes. And humans have a bite force of 122 pounds per square inch. They can sprint at speeds up to 28 miles per hour. Their bones can withstand impacts of up to 2,000 pounds of force before fracturing. They can survive without food for 3 weeks, without water for 3 days, and can continue functioning with blood loss that would kill most species in minutes." The admiral paused. "They also have something called adrenaline that apparently lets them ignore injury and temporarily exceed their normal physical parameters when threatened." Velshara's body had gone completely red. Her stress chiming sounded like a choir having a nervous breakdown. "And nobody thought this was important to mention?" The summary data said they were resilient. Resilient. In hindsight, that may have been understating it. Harper raised her hand again. "Instructor, those numbers are actually on the low end for humans. I run 3 miles every morning. My bite force is probably closer to 200 pounds. Everyone turned to stare at her. "What?" Harper said. Velshara disconnected the communication. She turned to face Harper, her 4 eyes reflecting the medical bay lights in 4 different expressions of dawning horror. "Cadet Harper, I need you to answer a question, honestly." "Okay." "When the 4 Crixians approached you, did you feel threatened?" Harper thought about it. "Not really. Not really. They were being kind of rude, but I wasn't scared or anything." "So you didn't have an adrenaline response?" "No." "And you still incapacitated all 4 of them?" "They slipped, Instructor." "Stop saying the slipped." Velshara's chiming had reached frequencies that were probably illegal in some systems. "What would happen if you did feel threatened? What would happen if your adrenaline activated?" Harper's expression finally changed, slightly. A small crease appeared between her eyebrows. "I don't know. I've never really been in a fight before. This is my first galactic assignment." Thayer made a sound like he was choking. Velshara's crystalline body had developed several new stress fractures. Her internal matrices were pulsing irregularly. "You've never been in a fight?" "No, Instructor." "You're completely untrained in combat." "Yes, Instructor. That's why I'm taking your class." "You put 4 trained specialists in a ceiling with no combat training. 1 specialist. The other 3 went in the floor, wall, and folded." "That not better." Harper made a note on her datapad. Velshara looked at Thayer. Thayer looked at Velshara. The medic looked at both of them. The folded Crixian groaned softly from his regeneration pod. Instructor, Thayer said quietly, his antennae vibrating with barely suppressed panic. What do we do? Velshara's 4 eyes moved back to Harper, who had gone back to taking notes like the conversation was over. The human sat there, completely unassuming, radiating aggressive averageness, apparently unaware that she represented the single most terrifying thing Velshara had encountered in 400 years of teaching. A Class 7 Deathworld species, untrained, in a logistics program, who thought putting people in ceilings was an accident. Velshara's stress chiming slowly faded. Her body shifted from red to purple to a deeply resigned blue. Her internal matrices settled into a steady, fatalistic pulse. We continue the course, she said quietly. WHH? Thayer's antennae shot straight up. We continue the course. Cadet Harper is here to learn. I am here to teach. That's what we'll do. Velshara straightened, her 2 crystalline arms clasped behind her back in formal instructor posture. But from now on, all species integration exercises will be supervised, directly, by me, at all times. And Cadet Harper will be placed in a separate training category. What category? Thayer asked. Velshara looked at Harper one more time. The human had her datapad, her stylus, her regulation bun, her completely normal expression. She looked like every average student Velshara had ever taught, except for the part where she was a walking apocalypse who didn't know it yet. Category Deathworlder, Velshara said. Population 1. Threat assessment pending. Harper looked up. Does this mean I need different homework? No, Cadet. It means everyone else does. Velshara turned and walked out of the medical bay, her crystalline form leaving small stress fracture patterns on the floor with each step. Behind her, she could hear Thayer trying to explain the situation to the medic in increasingly panicked chittering. She'd been teaching for 400 years. She'd never lost a student. She was starting to think the galaxy had lost something else entirely, its collective mind, for letting Deathworlders enroll in standard programs. But at least the gravity calibration was back to normal, small victories. 3 weeks later, the combat training facility looked exactly the same. Same reinforced mats, same weapon racks, same overhead lights casting sharp shadows across the floor. What had changed was the training schedule. Velshara stood at the center of the facility, her crystalline body a cautiously optimistic blue, reviewing her datapad. All non-Deathworld species have been moved to morning sessions, she announced. Afternoon sessions are now reserved for GW, specialized instruction. Harper sat cross-legged on her practice mat, datapad in lap, stylus ready. She was the only student present. Just me? Just you? That seems inefficient. That seems safe. Velshara's 4 eyes fixed on the human. The Crixian Medical Board has requested you be kept at minimum 50 meters from their cadets during non-supervised hours. They're still upset about the slipping thing? 3 of them are still in regeneration pods. Harper made a note. I should probably send an apology. Please don't. The last time you tried to apologize, Cadet Thayer had a panic response and barricaded himself in his quarters for 6 hours. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. You knocked on his door. The door dented inward from your knuckles. The station uses soft metal for doors. The station uses reinforced durasteel rated for hull pressure containment. Velshara's stress chiming started up softly, then faded as she consciously controlled it. Cadet Harper, we need to discuss your training progression. Okay. The Galactic Council has reviewed Earth's complete physiological data, all of it, including the parts the embassy thought were too alarming for initial integration. Harper's expression didn't change. And humans are apparently classified as an apex persistence predator species with enhanced threat response mechanisms and catastrophic damage tolerance. Velshara set down her datapad. You're built to chase prey until it dies of exhaustion, survive injuries that would kill most species instantly, and become more dangerous when injured. That seems dramatic. Your species once hunted megafauna by following them for days until they collapsed from heat exhaustion. Well, yeah, we didn't have claws or venom or anything. We had to get creative. Velshara's internal matrices pulsed rapidly. Creative. You call pursue predation until biological shutdown creative. It worked. There was a long silence. Velshara's 4 eyes studied Harper, who sat there looking completely unremarkable, holding her datapad, waiting for instruction like every other student. Except she wasn't like every other student. She was a barely trained Deathworlder who thought putting people in ceilings was an accident and apologizing could dent reinforced doors. Here's what we're going to do, Velshara said finally, her resonant voice carefully measured. I'm going to teach you proper combat technique, actual structured training, and you're going to learn to control your strength relative to other species. I don't really want to fight anyone, instructor. I know, that's what makes you terrifying. Velshara's body shifted to a thoughtful purple. Cadet Harper, you incapacitated 4 trained specialists while you were trying to take notes. Imagine what you could do if you were actually trying. Harper thought about it. That does seem concerning. Yes. So you want me to learn control? I want you to learn that you need control. Because right now, you're the galactic equivalent of a warship that thinks it's a shuttle. Velshara picked up her datapad again. And I've been teaching for 400 years. I've never lost a student. I'm not starting now. Harper stood up, both arms at her sides, datapad held carefully. Thank you, instructor. Don't thank me yet. We start with basic awareness exercises. You're going to learn exactly how strong you are compared to every other species on this station. That sounds educational. It's going to be horrifying for both of us. Okay? Velshara's stress chiming started up again, soft and resigned. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Cadet Thayer's antennae clicking nervously as he walked past the training facility at maximum safe distance. 400 years of teaching, never lost a student. She just never expected the student would be the dangerous one. Let's begin, Velshara said. Harper picked up her stylus. The galaxy was going to need better warning labels.